Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, my guest is Ross Brannon with Strategic Wealth Specialists. Welcome, Ross.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
So tell us some about yourself, how you got to where you are now, and what made you become an advisor.
Well, something you'll not be able to tell on the podcast, audio or Zoom, but I'm 6'8", and so I'm a tall drink of water, as they say. Actually, I played football in college at Florida State University and stayed here in Tallahassee afterwards. And I was a client of the firm, and then I've kind of always been financially minded. Hope that doesn't come off cocky. And they said, "Hey, come work with us," and that was 11 years ago, and here I am today.
Nice. So when you first started in the industry, you started with the company you're with now.
Correct. Which, yeah. So that probably a lot of people are kind of career with one group. A lot of people kind of hop around to each their own. There's obviously different models. And so I've been with this company, and really, our philosophy, I'm just a big believer in. And so there's just a lot of things that I see where improvements can be made in the financial services arena. Unfortunately, there tends to be not the greatest reputation with financial advisors.
Right.
And so hopefully I can, at least with the people I work with, help cure that ill, if shall we say.
Right. Now, tell us, Strategic Wealth Specialist is not just located in Tallahassee.
Now, we've got offices from New Orleans all the way to Tampa. I don't even know how many advisors we have now. And so we're a growing firm. It didn't start. Hasn't always been that big. And the firm's been around for over 40 years.
Okay.
So it's been really successful. Worked with thousands of clients over multiple decades. We've seen what works and what doesn't work, and we like to pride ourselves on that.
Right. So what about financial advising, is what about it really gets you up and gets you going in the morning?
I think there's a lot of things out there that the public, quite frankly, is, dare I say, misinformed. I don't think anyone's lying to anybody. I just don't know that the whole truth has always been being told.
Right.
Kind of one of the big things that I talk about a lot is rate of return. Now, rate of return is a very sexy thing to talk about. I like to talk about it. I'm sure you like to talk about it. We all want it. We have to get a rate of return on our money. But the dirty little secret, dare I say, is that rate of savings is actually more important than rate of return.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Warren Buffett says the number one habit to acquire is the habit of thrift, i.e. be a saver. So, it's important that we save a very large percentage of our income, as much as we can, obviously get a rate of return on it, but sometimes people chase rate of return because they were poor savers. If
Right.
you're a good saver, you don't have to chase rate of return unless you want to.
Okay. You've been doing this for a while now. What is it that you know now you wish you knew when you first started out?
What I just said. I wish when I was 21 years old,
Right.
or 23 years old, because I made some good money before I came in this industry, and I wasn't the saver that I should have been. I was probably more of a speculator and an investor and a speculator a little bit, and not realizing there's a lot of power in having a large amount of liquidity. It gives you options.
Right.
And when I was young, I thought I knew it all, like every young kid does, and I didn't. And so I think that's one of the critical things.
What are some of the questions you wish that your clients would ask when you're first meeting with them?
Um, is let's see, is common knowledge that common, and is it knowledge?
Right.
uh, you know, you know, typically what we think is just kind of a no-brainer in finance, it isn't always that way when you peel the onion back. There's always more to the story. So I like to talk about like the 401k. I like to pick on the 401k. It's the sacred cow of finance, the retirement account. And it's just one of those things that there's just so much misinformation about, and people think it's the panacea. And typically speaking, for most people, the 401k account is not going to be enough money for retirement for
Right.
someone. It was really designed to layer on top of other things, pension, social security. But it's kind of evolved in this thing where if you don't contribute as much as humanly possible, then you're an idiot, and I don't know that that's accurate. Um, Also, one of the things which I know you could speak to is tax deferral. I am vehemently anti-tax deferral.
Hmm.
I think deferring taxes in the current environment we are in is very likely a large mistake. I believe that we are in probably the lowest tax rates we're going to see for many, many decades.
Hmm.
I obviously could be wrong, but I think the evidence is probably on my side, and I've yet to meet a CPA who does not agree with me. Um, but that's the one thing about predictions: they're never right; they're always wrong. It's just questions in what direction and how by how much. So I wouldn't be deferring tax, and obviously, many times retirement accounts are tax deferred. So a lot of people, in my experience, don't understand how the tax code works. They don't understand how marginal tax rates work, how effective tax rates work, how money taken out of a retirement account is taxed. And when you lay it out to them, it's not always the answer isn't always the same. It kind of goes back to, we tend to make decisions in a vacuum with blinders on
Hmm.
instead of taking a broad look and looking at things from a macroeconomic perspective. It's like throwing a rock in the pond and only focusing on the splash and not focusing on the ripple effects.
Right.
So, and I find when people make decisions macroeconomically, many times they're different than if they were making them microeconomically.
Yeah, I think that you definitely hit on some good points there. I mean, with everything that's happened with the pandemic and all of the money that's been given out tax free, this bill needs to be paid someday. So it's just, when are the tax rates going to go up is really the question. We're definitely at a historic low when it comes to tax rates. So and with the current administration that we have, they're saying rates are going up. So we'll have to wait and see what
Well,
happens.
well, I actually make the statement. I tell people it's not a political statement. I don't care if you're Republican or
Right. I
Democrat.
agree. I
And I
agree.
don't care who's in office, Republican or Democrat, rates are going to go up. It's a
Yep.
math issue. Now, obviously, there are some people out there pushing for uh, some policies where the debt does not have to get paid off. And, that's a different topic for a different day. I don't buy into that. And I think the bill has to come due, although we've been pretty good at kicking the can down the road. Uh, uh, I think the political rhetoric is very easy to stoke the flames, and I think you're going to get higher tax rates sooner rather than later. And they're coming in like 5 years anyway, just because the sunset of the Trump tax cuts. But
Correct.
I think they're coming even sooner.
Yeah. I think our we don't have a can anymore. I think it's more of a barrel that is being kicked down the road, and something's going to change soon. It's just you win. So, what are some of the common mistakes that you are seeing clients make before they come in and talk to you?
Well, I see a couple of things. Well, I see a handful of things. Obviously, savings rate, like I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
not adequately being protected. That could be something as mundane as auto insurance,
Right.
not having the right liability coverages. It could be not having the appropriate amount of other types of insurance. Um, but one of the big ones to go along with the tax conversation is something I call tax diversification. So, you know, when I typically meet someone, they're very heavy in tax deferred accounts as a percentage of their wealth,
Mhm.
especially if you set aside their house. Um, and what I try and do is to diversify the taxes and try and as close to a third, get money in tax free, uh, taxable, and tax deferred. And it's kind of hard to do when you're older, obviously, unless there's some Roth conversions going on. But steering money into taxable and tax free is a little more advantageous, especially tax free, than tax deferred.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that because especially with the tax deferred, because so many times, people have just been, putting away in, tax deferred savings. And then when they come of age, they have to start taking, the money out through their RMDs, and they don't have cash any other place but there. And they're not able to do a lot of the things that they want because they don't have the available cash. But then when they got to take those RMDs, they're pretty large, and they get beaten up pretty bad on taxes when they do that.
I talked with someone probably 9, 12 months ago. They they had a nice nest egg, um, and I am not exaggerating. 90% of it was in tax deferred money.
Oh,
And the interesting thing was they retired early, and
wow.
so they're in their mid 50s, and of course, let's say they had $5 million. Uh, Reality is they don't have $5 million.
Right.
They've got about $3.75 million, or whatever the tax rate is. Um, and they didn't realize that, but we were having a conversation, and they thought everything was hunky dory based on some assumed rates of return that their advisor told them. I was like, well, that's fine. You can assume that rate of return. I said, quite frankly, I'd rather assume a lower rate of return and
Right.
be wrong and get a higher rate of return than assume a higher rate of return and be wrong and get a lower rate of return.
Right.
And so but they didn't quite see the the challenges of the tax deferred account. And for so long, when these things came out, the highest rate was 70%. And during the Carter and Reagan years, for so long, you were told you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. Well, that was a legitimate statement if the tax rate stayed the same previously. But tax rates move, as you know. And what I actually find is my most successful clients typically are in higher tax brackets, and most of my clients don't want to take their RMDs because they don't need the money,
Right.
and so that's a challenge. Now, it looks like they're probably going to do Secure Act 2.0 and probably extend the RMDs another 3 years, which I think is a good thing.
Right.
But we'll see what happens.
How do you, so when somebody comes into you and, your person that's got, 90% of their nest egg is in, tax deferred accounts, how, and you're pointing this out to them. And I mean, so lots of times this is going to be the first time anybody's ever pointed this out to them. How do you help calm their fears at that point? Because they got to be terrified once they know that they're getting ready to get clobbered with taxes.
Well, the challenge is one, you have to be very truthful, and I'm pretty upfront with clients. Of course, I'm not like a jerk about it. I'm pretty upfront with about it. But if they have a good CPA who can do tax planning,
Hmm.
and maybe there's Roth conversions available, then that's a strategy to kind of unwind this to a degree. I don't know, Gary, you might know a CPA who does tax planning.
And one or
Um,
two.
so, but those are the conversations we have. It's like,
Right.
okay, you've got to get in front of a new CPA who's telling you how to unwind this, because this is not something we can fix overnight. We've got to deal with this uh, over a number of years. And when I work with someone like these people, they were parents of a friend of mine, and they had another advisor, and they thought he was amazing, and I'm sure he was a great guy, but we just weren't a good fit together, and that's okay. I'm not a good fit for everyone. Everyone's not a good fit for me. Same as as it was for you. And so when I work with someone, we got to make sure we're a good fit. Oil and water doesn't work, and we got to make sure that I got to make sure they're open-minded to hearing different things, because typically they are going to hear different things. If they think conventional wisdom is the only thing that works, then I'm probably not the guy for them, and that's okay. There's plenty of people out there.
Right. So, we're I don't want to say we're coming to the end of the pandemic because we're not even close, but it seems like things are starting to open up. Um, but going into the pandemic and going through this, I mean, what were some of the challenges, that you were facing in, whatever, acquiring clients or just being able to, stay in touch with your clients, if you weren't able to see each other in person?
Well, 90% of my clients are spread out all over the nation. So I've got about 10% of my clients in my local community. I have one client who owns several daycare businesses in my town, and he's a very, very successful man, but it was a challenging year for him. But I have a lot of clients who are dentists or orthodontists, endodontists, periodontists who own their own practice. And what you've seen in the dental world is they were shut down for 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, depending on what state they were in. But the pent up demand was so strong that all of them finished the year uh, flat or better than the year before. And then they had 2021, where so far they're all trending even higher. So I don't know if the coronavirus does something to your teeth, but it sure seems like it.
Right, right. Um, Tell us, I mean, there's, many different types of financial advisors out there. There's, the internet-based places that you can invest money and things like that. Uh, Tell our listeners, why is it important to use a professional like you to help with their investing needs?
So you have like those internet places you're talking about, like the Betterments, the Wealthfronts, what they call the robo advisors.
Right.
And there's a certain segment of people that's a good fit for. In my experience, and kind of here's the breakdown of the financial service industry. You have what I call the investment only people. To give an example, that would be like a Merrill Lynch or Raymond James or Edward Jones.
Okay.
You have a very insurance heavy side, which might be a Northwestern Mutual, New York Life, uh, maybe even a Mass Mutual, or even some independent people in there. And then you have, and typically in my experience, it's kind of like it's one loves investments, hates insurance, one loves insurance, hates investments. And I personally feel like it isn't an either or conversation. I think it's a both and conversation because you need them both. And so what I try to do with my practice is I try and do comprehensive financial planning where we're looking at everything.
Hmm.
Even like I said earlier, car insurance. I'm not a licensed car insurance agent. I'm looking at legal documents, auto insurance, property and casualty insurance, life, disability, long-term care, health, cash flow. We do a lot of cash flow modeling, retirement planning, all that stuff, exit planning if you're a business owner. We do all that, and we make sure everything is integrated together. But when we work with investments, it's my experience that human beings typically are not wired to be good investors. We tend to be very emotional, and a guy like Warren Buffett is emotionless. Okay, you have to be emotionless to buy when there's blood in the streets, to sell when everyone's buying, to buy when everyone's selling. And that's what he does. And I mean, if you read about him, he is fairly unemotional. Um, and so when I help clients invest money, I'm there to be their coach, to help them emotionally manage the ups and downs of the market. Because on every year, the markets on average are going to lose 15% at some point during the year, and they'll come back. But a lot of people, uh, just they make bad decisions. They buy high and sell low. I know one couple, they sold their 401k at the bottom in March of 2009.
Mm.
As of today, 12 years later, it's still in cash.
Oh,
That's a 6x return lost out
right,
on.
right.
And so this is why we have to make sure that we're invested in an allocation that suits our personality. How much volatility can we manage? And to make sure we understand how markets work, and to make sure you have someone kind of holding your hand through the process. If you don't need that and you got it all figured out, then you don't need me. Maybe Betterment or Wealthfront works for you, and that's great. But most people are not wired for Betterment or Wealthfront, in my experience.
Right. I, you know, I think, you hit it on the head earlier when you said that you're there to help coach.
Right.
And I feel the same way. It's like, we're constantly teaching and constantly coaching and many times talking people off the ledge, and helping them manage the emotion side of things, from, tax bills to the what the market's doing. Um, so when when you're picking somebody that you want to help coach with these investments, I mean, what's that ideal client look like for you?
Typically, they are a business owner at some level, like where they could be a dentist who owns their own practice. If they're not a business owner, they're a higher income individual. Um, it's typically probably someone over $500,000 income is typically who most of the clients are if they're, shall we say, W-2 employees. But a business owner, I find myself working with a lot because there's just more opportunities to help them if you're a business owner. You have more moving parts. If you're a W-2 employee, you have plenty of moving parts, especially if you're a high income W-2 employee, but there are, you're limited to some degree. So they need to be typically a good saver. Um, and they need to be coachable and have an open mind about things that they've never heard of before. And so those are typically the kind of the core values or the core characteristics of people that I work with.
So what, if somebody's, right now, you talked about the couple that, that kind of cashed out and put everything in cash in back in 2009. If you have somebody like that, how do you try to coach them out of that? Because it seems like they're terrified to put anything back in the market.
Well, they are obviously someone who does not manage volatility well.
Right.
And this is an older couple who watches the news a lot, which isn't really good for your
Right.
believing in markets. The Dow is down 100 points and they're acting like it's in the world. And like, what percentage is that again? Like
Right.
0.2%? Come on, people. So it's, you just have to you got to work with them. You got to say, hey, we have to get a rate of return on our money. Inflation is real.
Right.
And it's obviously picking up. Your money is going backwards if it's in cash. And your life expectancy for two people in your mid 60s, there's a very high probability one of you is going to live into your 90s. And so we've got to, and so it's just conversations like that where to kind of walk them through this.
So going through, dealing with different clients, different backgrounds, things like that. What is something that you've picked up from one of your clients that, kind of every time you talk to somebody, you remember it and kind of brings you back to center?
Well, I think the thing that I think a lot of people may not realize is there's really only about 4 ways to get rich in this country, in my opinion. Setting aside being an entertainer or an athlete, starting a business and growing a business is probably the number one way to become wealthy. Taking a company public is another way. Getting a Fortune 500 golden handcuff is another way. So those last two are pretty slim pickings of people who do that.
Right.
And then real estate entrepreneurship. So the wealthiest people I've ever met either started and built a business or they were real estate entrepreneurs. Those are the wealthiest people I've ever met. So if someone really wants to go to the next level financially, that's probably one of the 2 things that they should consider doing. At the same time, we live in a culture where it's like, let me go start this mobile app and then go public with it a year later and become a billionaire at 24 years old. Well, that's not real life.
No.
And so the reality is we want to get rich slowly And, how much perspective does someone have who becomes a billionaire at 24 years old?
Right.
I don't know that they have a lot. Maybe they do. And so we want to find out, like, okay, you signed a multi-million-dollar contract, Mr. Professional Athlete. Well, your professional career is typically not going to be that long.
Right.
So how much money do you have when you're 70? What does your family look like? So money is nothing more than a tool, but we idolize it and it can ruin us. And honestly, it exposes what you have inside of you. So you give any of us $10 million today, if we have good inside of us, you're going to see that come to fruition with money. If we have bad,
Right.
it's going to come to fruition. So, money is amoral. It's always misquoted that money is the root of all evil. That's not the quote. It says the love of money is a root of all evil. And so, as long as you view it in the right context, it is merely a tool that allows you to do something. Yes, I'd love to have $1 billion. I'd love to have a private jet. As a guy who's 6'8", flying commercial, not the most comfortable.
Right.
I'd love to have a G5, $50
Right.
million plane for those of you keeping score at home. But it's not the end of the world. And so, that's why I like to kind of make sure expose myself and my family to people in need. Like, a few years ago, I took my daughter to Peru. We were in the jungles of Peru in a little village where they bathed in the river,
Mm-hmm.
and they just got electricity like a year earlier.
Right.
So, I mean, that was in December we did that, and she didn't ask for much when we came home for Christmas.
Yeah.
So,
I bet.
that's the one thing I've noticed. It's like with money, you meet with someone who makes 50K, you meet with someone who makes 5 million. Money is all relative.
Right.
It's all relative. What's a lot to someone who makes 5 million is not a lot to someone who makes 50 million. What's a lot to someone who makes 50,000 is not a lot to someone who makes 500,000.
Right.
And so it's all relative.
Yeah, I agree. So what's a question I haven't asked you that you wish that I had?
I'm sure my wife would have a really good answer right here. Maybe one I may not like.
Right, exactly.
So, this is it's not really a question. It's just kind of a comment. I just think there's a lot of areas where I think a lot of people probably think they're getting true financial planning
Mm-hmm.
when they're really just getting advice on one section of their financial life. And the reality is you want someone who can be like a coordinator to help connect everyone. For example, the investment advisor probably isn't talking to the accountant about tax loss harvesting.
Right.
And the property and casualty agent's not talking to the attorney about liability limits. And the life insurance agent is probably not talking to the attorney about beneficiary designations and things like that. But if you can get all those people in one room, not necessarily in one room, that's not going to be possible, but if you can have them all connected and make sure everything is coordination, I think there's power in coordinating all your assets and everything. And I think there's a tremendous lack of coordination in personal finance today. We live in a culture that has become more busy than ever. If you ask somebody, it used to be, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Ask them now, how you doing? Oh, I'm busy.
Right.
Not everyone's busy. Everyone just thinks they're busy. But that's besides the point. We have to make sure everything we have is coordinated, and we have to make sure that regardless of what happens, our plan works.
Yeah.
So if I die prematurely from X, Y, or Z, does my family's plan work? If I become disabled, does my family's plan work? If I get divorced, does my plan work? If my spouse dies, does my plan work? If I lose a job, does my plan work? And so we have to make sure, because we live in a world where crap happens. Something bad's going to happen. The question is, how bad is it going to be? Is it going to be a fender bender, or is it going to be someone dying?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's just a fender bender, but we got to make sure we're prepared no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, play football, you're the quarterback. You want to make sure that you have all the right members of the team around for people, because if everybody is talking, again, when something does happen, and if something were to happen to you, and your wife's not the finance person, that's really not her thing, if all the team members are around, knows what's going on, they're able to help her. And I think that that's something that's really, really important that a lot of people don't do. That's for
Yeah.
sure. So if our listeners like what they're hearing, and they want to reach out to you, how best to get in touch with you?
Just go to my website, rossbrannon.com, rossbrannon.com. You can click a schedule a time to talk to me on the website. And from there, we can have a conversation and see if there's a mutual interest.
Great. So I really appreciate your time today. Our guest today on the show has been Ross Brennan with Strategic Wealth Specialist. We appreciate your time, Ross.
Thanks, Gary.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by PAS, Guardian, or North Florida Financial, and opinions stated are their own. Material discussed is meant for general information purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. Ross is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities LLC, PAS, OSJ 3664 Coolidge Court, Tallahassee, Florida 32311, 850-562-9075. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. North Florida Financial is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. Arkansas Insurance License Number 161390032, California Insurance License Number 0L10073, 2021 124005, expiration 0723.